And welcome. It's a full moon, and I am with my friend Casey Johnson here. And we've known each other for decades, and periodically kind of intertwining in and out of each other's lives. I'm doing programs, you're doing programs. We are both connected to metaphysics, spirituality, as well as kind of paying closer attention to signs, symbols, messages. I think more so than most people. I'd say that you're pretty astute about a lot of that.
Yeah, well, that's what I've always enjoyed about our connection is that you always get tickled when I share things on these symbolic, metaphoric levels. It's like, oh, that's my language. So, yeah, it is. It's beautiful to see things show up in these symbolic, metaphoric ways. You know, yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much the myth and story, based on Joseph Campbell and all these other great, great, great thought leaders. So, yes, I feel like we share so much in terms of being connected to the same pool of what inspires us.
Exactly, right. With our astrological understanding too, the planets. And we were talking just recently about this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happening, this spring, 2024, very strong, March, April, May. And now we're, coming towards the end of May, just after, the sun went into Gemini. And here on the 25th, in a couple of days, the Jupiter itself will go into Gemini. But still, these
Wow.
these 3 months, like, not only, for perhaps you might have some interesting stories and perspectives, but internationally, wow, of course, protests on the universities. I mean, that
Yeah.
is so
He's,
Jupiter Uranus.
yeah, 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 for sure. That's a flashback from the 60s.
That's right. That's right.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful and definitely necessary. And there's always been a kickback. There's always been a pushback when individuals get righteously outraged and stand up and say, no, this has got to stop. And you say the 60s because it was in 1969 that these two planets aligned. And of course,
Exactly.
there were in the universities, there were protests again that at that point, it was about the Vietnam War.
Of course,
And
all through it.
yeah, like one particular country, in this case, the United States, picking on basically the poor people over there, in Vietnam. And now here we have Israel and the Palestinians.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, history definitely has cycles, little ones, huge ones. And the issue is, we as humanity, no matter what our part of the tapestry, you know, are we gonna are we gonna be wise because of what history has told us and choose differently and dare to be authentic and speak up and stand for what we know to be true in the depths of our heart and our souls, even if we fear or sense that it's not going to be met well by the establishment. And so, the significance of our voice and being honest and authentic and not staying silent just because we don't want to tip the apple cart is just such a big theme that's up right now. And within our families, as well as within countries, this whole relationship between authority and the establishment and the authority of each human being, no matter where they dance within that establishment, that intersection and that dance is really what's going to create this new space that we're moving into. Like just watching and witnessing the dance of how we deal with authority that's been established for eons and cycles around again and again and again. Um, and just this whole dance between male and female, the patriarchy, the matriarchy, and what those two huge systems represent, and just watching it, but being honest and clear about how we're dealing with those two pieces inside of us and finding, that middle ground it's fascinating and it's fun and it's amazing how it's personally all showing up in my own life.
Right. Also in mine too.
Yeah.
And, but the metaphysical patterns, the transits of certain planets, the conjunctions, the alignments, and things like that. Well, we can certainly go on with that, but let's also kind of start off early on here, Casey, with you introducing yourself and what, would you say is your professional contribution that you would like the audience to know about?
Yes. Well put, my friend. So let's see if I can articulate that. Um, I think for me personally, even as a young girl, I always had this connection with a higher intelligence. I, as a little girl, I felt like I always had like this direct line to God, whatever that means to any of us, but I'd have these conversations, and we would debate, and I'd say, you this, and this is the reality, and like I don't understand, and we'd kind of duke it out together, like I was always trying to make sense of standing in the presence of this divine mystery. So I think for me, my my letting go of my personality, ego self, living as an individual, seeking whatever I thought I was seeking, kind of started crumbling. And I began to open up to a greater interest in metaphysics, into the unseen worlds, into the nature of who I truly am, which my family didn't afford me. I mean, it's all perfect, but my family was very, meat and potatoes. What you see is what you get. There is nothing other than the practical bare bones of what our five senses are about. So, of course, at some point, I mean, I always rebelled against it, but I didn't start opening up until maybe my late 20s, like when I was around 29, which is interesting because that's like the Saturn return. But that's when I really started like journeying and opening up to this vast landscape of the universe that lives inside of me, and connecting, you know, to, you know, to my soul through past lives, etc., and recognizing like the entirety of the journey. And I think for me, what always perplexed me was, I was talented, I was funny, I was musical, I was loved, I was determined, I was, disciplined. And yet I always struggled on the inside with why I never felt like I mattered, or I was enough, or had like core issues of shame. And that I didn't understand because it didn't make any sense logically to me. And so, in my quest to understand how energy works within the mind, within the spirit, within the body, I was able, through a period of 5, 6 years, and then continuing on, to sit at the feet of some profound spiritual teachers and masters. And I learned for myself what it is to truly be a spiritual teacher versus what it is to pretend to be a spiritual teacher. Do you know what I mean? Like, this thing that we can't really quantify called love, it's either present in its complete authenticity, or it's not really authentic, if that makes any sense. And I think that we have to learn through trial and error and experience kind of what love is and what love isn't, what the ego is and what the ego isn't, what the higher mind and the unconditional love of creator, source, God is, and what it isn't. And I began to really understand at a very profound levels the pieces of the psyche, and the higher mind, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, how they all work. I began to really understand all the levels of emotion, from very dark, repressed emotions to the highest exalted, blissful emotions, and how to make sense of that spectrum, but not be identified with it, like how to integrate it and find ourselves in the middle. And then of course, like tapping into the genius of our intuition, which we all have inherent rights to. We just need to learn to trusted, and the more we use it, the more we develop it. So it always felt to me that I was meant to use my connection to this divine intelligence, aka my gut, my intuition, my divine knowing, not just for myself and my own life, but to hold a space for others, to help other people learn to trust it at will, to know that what they know is what they know, and to not shove it under a rug or be afraid to listen to it or make choices based on it. I've met thousands and thousands of brilliant people who will say to me, I know I have the gift, but I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to trust it. I don't know how to feel peaceful with myself, and kind of own that part of myself. And for whatever reason, this tends to be the case. So my mission has always been to transform and ignite people's knowing and their divine brilliance and set them free so they can fly way beyond me. You know what I mean? Like there's no agenda or, oftentimes I'll work with people and in just one session. But it's maybe you understand this too. So many people have been in traditional therapy their whole life, trying to understand pieces that make no sense to them consciously, being stuck in patterns. And through the grace of God, not anything I'm doing, but being that divine messenger and holding that powerful space for people, they tell me in just one session, I got to the bottom of it, and I have my peace and my equilibrium back. I'm now at will in my life. I'm not being battered around by things I don't understand. So that brings an enormous amount of joy to be able to hold space for people there. And
Yeah, let me also then add to that because it's kind of a mirror dynamic in personal development, and what I too came to recognize is kind of a sleepiness from my own personal family. It's a military family.
that's a
Uh,
nice way to put it.
yeah.
Yes.
And and so it wasn't really nurtured there, and it wasn't until my 20s that I started asking the big questions, going to college, getting into philosophy and so forth, kind of like wondering what it's all about, and feeling like there's a bit of confusion, in the big picture of what they are telling us, what it's about. But yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired. But I found it very interesting listening to you just now because through either me doing astrology charts and being able to, or tarot cards too, being able in a short amount of time, just like reflecting back to people something bigger than themselves, but it is in them. And when they hear it, they know it. And so yeah, in a short period of time, people can just like get, a lot, so much more than what you were talking about with, ongoing, talk therapy.
Yeah.
And then once I got into hypnotherapy, going into the deep things, getting past the conscious mind that
Right.
oftentimes has been programmed anyway, so we have to like stop listening to it, period. Um, to get into the soul. And from the soul perspective, whether that be recollections of past lives, karma, reincarnation, cause and effect of what's happening right now, or just purely talking to the soul within each person. And again, in a short amount of time, people can like have these breakthroughs, these awakenings. And so that's something that I really admire about your work, and then it parallels my work. We go about it in slightly different ways, but really to kind of spark others to help them to wake up.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, Steve. I think the main thing is there's so much going on in the world right now that no one human can really make sense of. And the only thing that can, I think everybody instinctively wants to be in service, wants to be part of the transformation, wants to feel like they're not on the outskirts of society looking in. I get information from people, such beautiful people with such huge hearts who are almost in tears, and what they have to say to me is, I just want to feel like my life matters. I just really want to know that my life matters. And these are people doing volunteer work and charity work and doing their best to be brave and put a smile on and be responsible. And yet there's still a feeling like we cannot quite be part of those divine waves that are guiding humanity at large. And so if we're not really plugged into our own radar, our own knowing, if our circuitry in our bodies is out of alignment, even just a little bit, we can feel disconnected, even if we're not. And I think really it's about our relationship to power, our own power, and understanding what it is to be in our own power. We have a very distorted sense of the word power. But there's a beautiful, beautiful quote, and I love it being a musician, by Jimi Hendrix, the legend himself, who is famous for saying, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, then our world will know peace. And it's such a profound, simple phrase, but if you be with it, it's just so huge, because out there in the world, we see everyone wrestling for power and authority and power and money and power and control and power and righteousness and power of wanting to be on the winning team, and everyone else is on the losing team, like power, 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 versus if we're truly in our own personal power and we've taken our power back from culture and family members and country and authority and media, and we pull everything back inside, then we can stand in our own clarity and power and truly be a beacon of love and light and peace and harmony, which then welcomes other people to remember and come out of, as you put it, the haze, the sleepiness, the distortion. So I think one of the things that we don't understand, or we don't give as much value to as we could, is recognizing the contribution in the world and in the turn of events and in controversy and conflict becoming harmonized and peaceful, is the work that any one of us does as a light worker to own the shadows within ourselves and to hold a transcendent place of truth and not be knocked around by external events that are unfair and unjust and are confusing and are violent and are mean and are, just not in alignment with what we know could be in alignment. If we can hold a neutral place and stay in a place of grace and love, regardless of external factors. I've heard it said, and I think Greg Braden shared this at a conference earlier this year that I was at. He said, one person holding that place of being aligned and not in duality within ourselves is the same thing as affecting like 14 million people in the world. One person. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think we underestimate how powerful we are. Our power is not from doing all the social activist pieces. Of course, all that's important. And we'll talk about like some of the protests going on in college campuses, the protests that took place around Black Lives Matter, all of that stuff globally around the world. But the work inside is the golden key as far as I'm concerned. It's everything. It's absolutely everything, because everything is within us and we're all made of the same stuff.
Yeah, bravo. Yes. And that definite individual spark connected then to the body politic. And I came across that in my studies in college years and years ago. I think it was even like in the 16th century or something. Some philosophers were talking about really like a body, with the head and the muscles and the bones and things like that, is like the society, and there are individuals in society who play the role of a muscle cell or an eye cell or an ear cell, and that will show through them through their individual gifts. You know, imagine someone who would be like an ear cell in the larger body would
Yeah.
obviously be interested in voice, in music, sound, tone, things like that. And just by finding out how we fit in to the larger body, and shine our light and do our spark, that sparks off the others, and then we really have a radiant body if it really takes hold.
Mm, beautifully said.
Mm.
Well, I love that. And as they say too, the whole is so much greater than the sum of the parts. And that's where the quantum field exists, getting out of linear A plus B equals C. It's just there's nothing logical about how the realm of divine consciousness and intelligence works. It's everywhere and nowhere all at once. Um, and we said, well, what do we do in the presence of chaos? Well, without chaos, we can't have order. Like like it all is sacred and it's all just as beautiful. I think the piece beautiful that you said is that, our body is the master biocomputer, and every organ in the body, every piece of the body, every cell of the body can be broken down and um, shared as representations of the solar system, of the earth, of the elements, of musical notes and tones. Like it's all, the collective family of systems all relate to each other with a beautiful golden thread, and
Right.
that's the beauty. And the other thing that's so profound for me about the body, our body is everything. I mean, of course we know it's our sacred temple, and as synergized and healthy as our body is equals how healthy our mind is. Now, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? They kind of work together. Of course, the mind is the builder and it all starts there. But what I wanted to say is that the body is the doorway. Like just that idea that we go through the doorway and discover a whole new world. That new world shows up for us as we make peace with our body and integrate and wake up and own the pieces of our body that have perhaps been frozen shut through trauma, through grief, through loss, through unresolved issues where we felt unseen, unheard, misunderstood. These things, there's not a single person on this earth, no matter who we are, that doesn't wrestle with these kinds of issues, and there's one thing to say, oh, just forgive it and move on. But there's another thing to say, bring your love and your intelligence and your awareness and your consciousness literally to those places that have been disowned, just so we can cope and survive, and wake them up, tickle them back alive, and integrate them and welcome them back to this beautiful pillar of light that connects the heavens and the earth, where we stand in the middle. We're those messengers, and we are the ones that will help to bring, heaven to earth. It's not some kind of concept. It happens through our physical vessels.
Now, did you also study hypnosis?
I've done some hypnosis work. But I don't use it as one of my tools. I do more like transpersonal journey work and guided imagery and music work and altered states of consciousness, shamanic journey work, soul retrieval work. So it works similarly. I mean, hypnosis is about aligning the subconscious and the superconscious, you know what I mean, and going into those places that are running us and reprogramming them,
Mm-hmm.
through a higher mind, a different brain frequency. So it's brilliant and it's genius, but I don't work specifically as a hypnotherapist. But I can say that any and all altered state journey work is where, you know, is where the juice is.
Exactly right. And of course, when one is leading like a shamanic journey, a ritual, individual or a group program, there are all elements of, the hypnotic suggestions there. Also keeping the senses happy, with the eyes, the nose, the ears, and so forth, puts a person into, again, more of a receptive state. And so the teacher, the healer, the leader, once that person or the group, is in that receptive state, and then boom, then you can go ahead and implant those positive suggestions or the directions, the goals, the ideals, the light that really is why they're there, why they come, why they want to be a part of this particular program. And so even if you, let's say, don't use hypnosis per se, I'll bet that many of your programs will be quite hypnotic.
Well, absolutely, and it's funny you use the word hypnotic. One of my favorite words in the world is mesmer, like we're mesmerized, like, all of us just becomes one and in awe with something we're experiencing, like mesmer. So very similar. Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And of course,
absolutely.
as a hypnotist, I pay attention to Mesmer as an astrologer. Then Mesmer started, coming around and doing his thing just when we started the Aquarian age, and that
Right.
was when the planet Uranus was discovered. And right in between the American and the French revolutions, and then Uranus was discovered right there in the middle, and then we had the Industrial Revolution, and then Mesmer was doing his thing. And one thing that he thought was happening, they said probably not, but that we had these electro energies, that could go through our hands, which the electromagnetic work was also very popular at that point, where even Benjamin Franklin was doing his experiments in electricity. And so
Wow.
Mesmer was there, and he caught a hold of the electrical idea, and he thought, oh, that's what's going on. That's how it's working. And so it's really quite perfect, and therefore a part of our new Aquarian age.
Oh, wow. Stephen, that's what I love about you. Like you understand how history and current events and quote unquote revolutions, no matter what their size or purpose, like so correlate with significant transits and conjunctions astrologically. And I just love that about you. So
Mhm.
thank you for bringing that mesmer piece in out of nowhere. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And of
I love it
course,
how
that
it all fits
electricity
together
and
too.
Uranian energy is so powerful. I personally, you read my chart a long time ago. It was really like 30 years ago when we both were up in the Northern Virginia area.
Uh,
Um, and it was so cute. I took a little astrology course with you, and you asked us to pick two people that we adore or we relate to and run their chart and then share how their chart fits the reality of how their life was when they were on Earth.
a
And
good
I can,
assignment, by the way.
what?
That's a very good assignment.
Oh, it was such a good assignment. I mean, I just was in heaven. And I, of course, I picked my two heroes, Martin Luther King Jr. and Lucille Ball. I'll never forget it, and it's interesting because here I am 30 years later, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Lucille Ball's humor and her medicine as a comedian and Martin Luther King's powerful, outspoken, passionate message of justice and liberty and nonviolent transformation and rising up against the establishment, which we talked about earlier in our call. These two things, like right now, currently with this Jupiter Uranus conjunction, are calling me more than ever. Like I've been drawn to do some open mics for comedy. And again, like, don't prepare anything, just see what happens. And the other is, getting my book completed and out. and speaking more publicly about what's going on politically in terms of global leadership and all the stirrings and yearnings and issues, around the complications we see in the world, where most people feel so powerless, like to know what to do about them. So like this mighty, passionate, and powerful voice is like totally getting ready to come out of this sweet little body of mine. I don't know why I've stayed quiet for so long, but perhaps there's perfect timing for everything.
Mhm.
But this Martin Luther King Jr., Lucille Ball thing, I mean, their charts fit their lives to perfection. I remember
Right.
that.
And after 30 years, you still remember, that assignment, probably even some aspects about their charts. I recall that Lucille Ball is a sun sign Leo, and
Yes.
Martin Luther King is a Capricorn.
Well,
And
and Lucille Ball had a Capricorn moon.
okay, good. And so what a businesswoman she was.
Mm-hmm.
Desilu Studios. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that she helped to get Star Trek going.
Oh, wow. See, that's new for me
She
too.
was the producer of Star Trek. I like
No.
that is amazing, because again, I just thought of her as comedian, performer, really great with her skits and so forth. But if I were, to take a look at them and then, Martin Luther King, thoughtful, study. We gather together something of a very serious nature, and then you present it, and you do that. But then on the Lucille Ball side, I mean, entertainment and silly and ready to laugh and and not afraid to look foolish, and you do that too. And so
Oh, I'm great at that. Only you could speak that so clearly. That's hilarious. I'll let you get away with that one because you're my friend. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but isn't it true, though, that if we can just be human and not worry about how we're perceived or getting something right or wrong or making a mistake or just being who we are and all our humanness, we didn't come to this world to be perfect. We came to experience, we came to get things miserably wonky so that we could feel it all and get it and not judge ourselves and not beat ourselves up and like if we're wise enough, dare to do it a little bit differently next time. So when we're just being human with all the things that society says, well, this is good, this is not good, this is accepted, this is not accepted, like just letting it all be, doesn't it give all of us permission to be more authentic with the truth about all the things that make us who we are? I think one of the biggest tragedies is people holding back and staying on the sidelines because they have judgments about parts of themselves that perhaps came up in their younger life, where they received trauma because they were mocked or humiliated or ashamed for something, however small it was. And I think that we need to just shake all that gunk off and say, you know what? All there is now. And I want to shine, so I'm going to shine. And I don't care what the fallout is or what the fallout isn't. I don't care if I'm loved. I don't care if I'm approved of. I don't care if I'm validated. I'm just going to do me because that's where my peace and happiness comes from.
very good, and important. And of course, along the way to shining or expressing, sometimes we have to do the work, we have to do the therapy, we have to, dig in a little bit and find out, where it went wrong or what kind of damage was done, hurt, self-esteem, and so forth. And then in various methodologies, being able to break through that, find a healing, closure, and then we can really express ourselves. Years ago, I attended a hypnosis program, and a person was describing really being emotionally humiliated in, I think, like the second grade. And so it was coming basically from an 8-year-old girl. Now this woman was in her 30s at the time, and the instructor said, you do know that you now, as a 30-year-old, that 8-year-old girl who you don't even know anymore is still kind of like throwing you off track, and it dawned on me that, oh my goodness, that's actually kind of like ludicrous. If we put the 8-year-old girl and the 30-year-old together, it'd be like, well, my poor little dear, but it was still haunting this woman after decades, that this little voice, this little snot nose, was still kind of pushing her buttons. And when she could logically think about it, she goes, "Oh my goodness, that is kind of ridiculous that me, an adult, a mature woman, is letting an 8-year-old kind of like give me a bad day."
Yeah, but as you know, these things don't make logical sense. It doesn't matter how smart or how wise or how aware we are. A wound is a wound is a wound. A scar is a scar is a scar. And interesting, you say when she was 8, but so often these humiliations, these quote unquote defeats, these scenarios that from a human perspective didn't end well, they get dragged with us thousands of years later. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I work profoundly with someone's soul's past lives. I mean, I can go in with someone if it's appropriate. I don't do it with everybody, and go to 1, 2, 3, 4 lives quickly with the themes, who they were, what happened, what was unresolved, what were the emotions, where their state of mind was when they passed through the veil. And all of a sudden, all of that stuff percolates up from the subconscious into their conscious, and everything just starts shifting and moving and realigning. The tears come down because of the recognition and the resonance of what was true. And suddenly, that knot in the belly or that lump in the throat has an opportunity to heal and to loosen and to not be an impediment to their fullest expression in this lifetime. It's
So,
it's it's beautiful.
yeah, beautiful and so important. Now, when you do pick up on these past lives, is it you as a psychic, or are you pulling it through a dialogue from these people?
I can do both. I mean, there's a lot of merit in holding space for others to retrieve their own soul based past life material.
Yeah,
For sure, there's a place for that.
yeah,
And I often just retrieve it if they give me permission to work with their soul and their superconscious. Of course, everything has to be with permission to
right.
stay responsible and ethical. But as a healer and as a metaphysician, I always like do a deep, deep, deep prayer before I work with anybody, connecting myself to the divine intelligence, to some of the most powerful light working ascended masters, Jesus and others. And I get my ego and my sense of what I think I know out of the way. And so a divine grace and a divine knowing is able to come in, connect with that person's energy fields and soul records. And so the lifetimes can come through like popcorn. You know, People think, oh, past life work, it was all the buzz, 10, 20 years ago. Um, but when we recognize that we're a soul that incarnates again and again and again and again to learn what love is and what love isn't, to put it simply, going back to these records that live in the body and live in the psyche is a profound way to help people become radically present in this moment. All that matters is the right now, here now moment. Nothing else exists. So we don't go back for entertainment or, oh, I want to know this or this or this. But if it can help to get a person present and integrate those parts of themselves that are afraid to be successful or fear public humiliation or don't want to outshine someone else because they remember someone seeking revenge on their life out of jealousy. Like, just as an example, some themes, these things can be amazing to clear. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Both are valid and both have their reasons for
Mhm. Well,
Yeah,
definitely, yeah, I recognize that, because when I do a tarot reading, when I do an astrology reading, I am giving information. I am supplying that. When I do hypnosis, I try and pull it from them.
of course, when you're in
Yeah.
an altered state of
Mhm.
consciousness, that's what the journey is. They get their own intersection with, you know, the landscape that lives inside, which knows everything and is connected to everything. So
Yeah.
that's why that journey work is just so genius.
Yeah.
And it
So
always was a little baffling to me that more people aren't interested in experiencing it, because um, it truly is the one thing that can set us free.
it
Um,
is, and it's so quick, compared to like the talk therapy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
More and more and more around talk therapy. I mean, there's a place for traditional therapy. I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. But, you know, it's important that we not identify with our story and our past and the things that have scarred us, because we don't want to drag them forward. If we can rise above it, kind of neutralize those memories, and give ourselves permission to step up and create a brand new identity without the story defining us, then we have the opportunity to create whatever story our heart desires as we take the next step and the next step and the next step. And, I have a few teachers that I've worked with, that are so clear about what would the person I'm becoming choose in this moment? What would the person I'm becoming think about XYZ experience?
Well, that's a good way
And
to do
so,
it.
yeah, so like instead of being the oldest version of our past, we have the opportunity to be the youngest version of our future and allow the future knowing to pull us forward and to make our choices from that place.
Very good. Yes. And again, we're playing with time and the concept of time. And here we are. And I think that right here, right now, you and I are surfing the now.
There you go. You're
It's
a
right,
great
right here,
surfer.
and yet we
Yes.
both, know about past and development of personalities, as well as, going back in history and culture and so forth. And then here we are, like looking, hoping for a better future, but that's the past, there's the future, but here we are now. And this is
Yeah.
where this is where we have to bring the attention and do as best as we can and not go back to sleep.
Well, I think Eckhart Tolle, is the one that really was able to reach the masses with that sense of, um, what was the name of his book? Be Here Now was Ram Dass. What was Eckhart Tolle's book anyway? But just the power of the present moment. I feel so bad that I forget the name of his
Is
famous
that the
book.
power of now?
The Power of Now, and then Ram Dass was Be Here Now. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, yeah, I just always loved any experience that could take us out of our sense of self and our individuated personality and identity in this world, to merge us and put us in a brand new energetic field that was so much bigger than any of us. And that's why, for most of my life, I've been very interested in kirtan and devotional chanting, because when we come together as a group, like everything's about community and coming together as a group. I just think any ways we can get out of our sense of being separate from the rest of the world and merged in community with loved ones, and recognizing that we all have so much more in common than we have differences. But singing praises, devotional praises to the creator, to the maker, to the one, to God, to the divine, whatever you want to call it, together collectively with wide open hearts and intense presence, right? Present, presence, the here now moment. It's just the most beautiful thing, to share that kind of sound and vibration and prayer together. And I think that music and sound is really the ultimate physician. A dear teacher of mine from years ago, he's no longer with us, Don Campbell, he wrote a book that said, music, the ultimate physician for times to come. You know what I mean? Like everything's energy, everything's vibration. And that's interesting because one of the things I do when I work with people is something called sounding the body wisdom. And I can just take people in the now moment with whatever is up and true for them and start just with conscious breathing and staying very present and bringing the awareness to all aspects of the body and then allowing the conscious breaths to slowly turn into a tone, a sound, a phrase, a word, and just follow where it wants to go. And I can watch an entire person's physical body and energetic field just completely shapeshift, where they just look completely different at the end of it. Like it's so beautiful. People, we're all more than not just going through life doing what we think is the equation for happiness. And it's no one's fault, but so often, that place doesn't really take us to the place we think it was supposed to take us to. And it doesn't mean don't pursue great things and have a great, rich, full life. It just means like inner work first, outer work second.
Right, right. The Jupiter-Uranus alignment, and we're still feeling it, and certainly the world, definitely most universities in the United States are feeling it right now. And you said earlier that you had in the last couple of months, some profound either experiences or awarenesses and things like that. It's been for me as an astrologer, also as a historian, to just observe what is going on, the parallels that I often do with what has happened in the past when they were together. And on one level saying, wow, look at the manifestation today. And, breaking it apart just a little bit, Jupiter is automatically associated to higher education and universities,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Uranus protest a definition of yes or no. Whose side are we on anyway? We have to stand up for a minority. I mean, they come together and it's just perfect right now, what's going on.
Yeah. And again, back to the greats, Gandhi, dealing with the British and, all that colonialism, and Martin Luther King during the civil rights era in the 60s, how do we stand up and protest, but do it with nonviolent, nonviolent protests.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a slippery thing to understand and hold on to, especially when there's so much violence going on in the world right now, not just collectively in terms of countries being at war, but within family systems and with opposing beliefs and with friends that we've known forever that have a completely different belief system than we do. It's frustrating and it can create discord even if we don't express it out there. And so, how do we build a bridge of peace and understanding for ourselves, with our friends, with our community, when all the beliefs are scrambling for, superiority? And my belief is better than your belief. Do you know what I mean? Like it gets nutty, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, looking at the astrological dynamics, just within this country, having our Pluto return to the United States. Pluto takes 248 years to go around the zodiac. It is, in the last 8 years, it is right back where it was in 1776.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, wow, Pluto and Plutonians and plutocrats and the conspiracy theories and kind of like the alternative facts, where did that come from? Except from kind of like this underground subversive that could go towards propaganda, could go towards manipulation, but then when it really moves towards alternative facts or conspiracy theories, then it's a parallel to me to like a virus. We had, of course, the COVID virus during this time too, but then also, a virus of thinking, that wow, similar to a virus, that in which you cough or people, can catch it from someone else with these memes and with the words and with the conspiracy, that's also contagious. And it was like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
parallel going on that was
It's fascinating. Yeah.
wild and fascinating, but it's right on with what I know about the cycles.
Yeah. There's so much I could like jump into with what you just shared. So thank you so much. It's juicy stuff for sure. Just something that comes up for me, which I think is an important point to bring up because it's so big in our world right now. Um, you know, back at the millennium, you know, we had the the presidential run between Al Gore and George Bush. And as we know, Al Gore won the popular vote with a huge number of votes. But George Bush was put into the presidency based on one vote in the Supreme Court, which trumped everybody else's vote. So it doesn't matter what side you're on or what was right or what was wrong. The point is that election was not determined through an appropriate democracy.
Right.
And therefore, you could say it was stolen, you know,
Exactly.
but
Right. Right.
just because it
And
followed the,
that particular party, the Republicans, became emboldened
well,
by it.
yeah,
And they say, we got away with that one. Let's keep going.
I know. Well, but this is what I want to share, which is so important, is that, um, Al Gore, I always felt way before the election and the vote. I always told everyone, I said, Al Gore is our destined next president. I mean, I just knew it with every cell of my being, not because I wanted him to be president, but I just knew that this was his appointment. Do you know what I mean?
And
And
not
so,
not because he won the popular vote.
right, right. But what I want to say is, and I don't want to get into a lot of, I'm not about taking one side or another. It's important that we don't judge sides or anything like that. But the point is, Al Gore was so gracious and so generous and so yielding and so honorably, yielded to passing the presidency to the Republicans. There was no violence. There was no anger. There was no shame. There was no blame. There was just honor and dignity because his love for the country and everything this country stands for was far more important than the pain and the grief he was feeling over that loss and having it ripped away from him.
Right, right.
So, so
That you're
I
right.
think
That
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 we
was a
so
stolen election.
yeah, but this is what I want to say, and thank you, Stephen, is that that what transpired at the millennium for me personally was bloodier than the Civil War in terms of divide, but we didn't acknowledge it as bloody as the Civil War because we didn't see the blood or the bullets. They were invisible. But the level of animosity and violence was equally there. They say, I don't know where this is coming from, but they say, being hit with a physical bullet is the same scarring and trauma as being attacked with a verbal, energetic bullet if the intent is to want to kill or murder someone. So it's not about, yeah, we can go into all the gun stuff, but the point is, it's the intention behind energy. And so here we are, you know, 20 years later, that interesting 20-year piece. And, we have the same situation, but the Republicans, not all of them, but the MAGA part of the Republican Party feels like it's completely fair game to use violence to prove their point. Matter of fact, they do it deliberately and they're stirring up all the people who have internal violence that has not been, integrated or put into perspective you know, to show up with the cause. And so, we all just need to step back and not say who's right or who's wrong, or how it should be or how it shouldn't be, or what God wants or what God doesn't want. I mean, we, the collective body of humanity, we're creating the story as it unfolds together with our own responsibility and our own connection to divine knowing. But we have to ask ourselves, now I forgot my point, but I'm going to get it in a minute. Oh, here it is. We have to ask ourselves a very basic question. And I hope this doesn't offend anybody. But if you go inside and ask yourself this basic question, do you feel like you're more in alignment with Jesus and what Jesus' principles and teachings are about? Or do you feel like you're more in line with the people who killed Jesus? And it gets slippery when we use the term Jesus because it means so many different things to everybody. But the point is, in every religion, the one thing that is taught is harmony, peace, love, forgiveness, and holding a place of sacred alignment and not give our power away to what is perceived as an enemy out there. And this is the golden key that is going to solve the unrest and the challenges that everyone feels so helpless to affect, and this whole thing of how do we deal with violence and come back inside and dare to be the one that says, oh, maybe this one will be the one to stand tall and proud with roots deep in the ground, accessing powers from above, igniting hearts everywhere with love. Oh, maybe this one will be the one to break chains of hatred, of greed, of selfishness, of fear, of doubt, of retribution. Oh, maybe this one will be the one to stand in sovereign truth and know peace and know justice and know what is asked of us in the presence of very, very, very hard, difficult times we are in today.
Very
So
good.
I just want
Bravo.
that.
Yeah, very good. And we're back to Gandhi and Martin Luther King,
Yeah.
to stand strong in your belief system, but still, it is nonviolent and it's still focused upon the goal. And unfortunately, as we both know, they were both assassinated.
Yes. Yes. And that's an interesting topic, especially when we work with past lives, because,
Right, right.
we can kill and destroy a body just like they crucified Jesus. But if we recognize that we're not identified as the body, you know what I mean? Then,
Right,
they
right.
can't know our soul. I know
Exactly.
that's
And the
slippery.
truth goes
It's
marching
not a
on.
Pollyanna answer to anything. I mean, it's horrible to deal with death as we know it. But if we as humanity can wake up to the soul consciousness and the super consciousness and the higher self consciousness that all the great illuminated souls and master teachers and saints and prophets were, and mystics and poets and musicians have been aware of in their lifetimes, then we can recognize that causing harm to another doesn't give us more power, doesn't make us right, doesn't end the war. Do you know what I mean? I
Mhm.
always think to myself, well, if one people hates another people for whatever reason, I don't want to use literal examples, but for whatever reason, just unforgivable atrocities, right? Like that's not forgivable. Anything else is, but not this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like that's, I just find such humor in that. It's like, then to want retribution and to want revenge and to want to kill and bring justice to whoever's perceived as the enemy, right? And the thing is, in this divided world, one side thinks the other side's the enemy, and that side thinks that side's the enemy. So we're all enemies. Do you know what I mean? According to whoever you're talking to. So
Exactly.
if we're out to annihilate the enemy and jail the enemy and catch the enemy in their horrible demonic choices, like however it's termed, then we're just being another form of that evil and darkness. And then it's like, well, which evil and darkness is better than the other. I mean, it just becomes this game of tumbling and gymnastics, mentally and otherwise, that gets us nowhere and just sucks us into a big black hole. And that's why the grace of God and the power of God and the guiding light and intelligence of the divine is so beautiful, because it's not about the mind. It doesn't matter how educated anybody is. You know, some people in this world who have no education and don't even speak their language properly because they were never taught reading and writing are some of the most awake, loving, wise, brilliant people, because they have innate wisdom to just understand how to live a happy life and how to not get stirred up by things that happen to them that aren't quote unquote fair.
Yes,
Right?
indeed.
Nothing's fair in this world. That's what this duality on earth is about, you know?
Mm,
So
yeah,
anyway, it's
and
just,
how
it's
best we
interesting
can
stuff.
deal with things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been communicating here for more than an hour, and so I would like to find out how people can get in touch with you if they would like to um, procure your talents, do a program with you, whatever. How can people get in contact with you?
Thank you so much, Stephen. So I talked about my one-on-one work, which I've been doing for 18 years professionally. You know, I have clients and people I've worked with all over the world with all sorts of different walks in life. But my true love and the things I love doing, even beyond the transformational sessions and the triumph coaching work I do, which is all one-on-one work, very. What I love doing more than anything is my retreats called Romancing the Soul, and they're sacred arts retreats where we gather, you know, 10, 12, 16 people. I keep them small and intimate, and everyone brings their soul medicine and their presence and their wisdom to the circle. And for a whole weekend, we play, we weave, we dabble in journeying and music and art and storytelling and laughter and tears and honesty and silence and meditation and chanting. And by the end of the weekend, we've experienced unity, oneness, miracles, just amazing magic together. And so it's just, it's rare in our world today to be able to have that kind of experience when everything is virtual and on Zoom, which I understand the beauty of that.
Yeah.
But I teach these sacred arts retreats more and more now, like one a month. I'm willing to travel if anyone wants to host one, and you can bring friends and people that you work with together. So I can talk to anyone about that. Uh, and I teach lots of different classes as well. But you can reach me. My website right now is kind of under construction, but I have this new business called Crown Institute for Conscious Evolution and Conscious Revolution, supporting peace through the arts, healing the heart, and awakening sacred wisdom. That'll be up and running, that website, very, very, very soon. But you can contact me through my email address, soulfulljourneys at Gmail. Soulful, full, it has two L's, and then journeys, JOURNEYS, at gmail.com. Or you can just text me, or you could find me on Facebook, KC, capital K period C period Johnson in Virginia Beach. And there's always on my page to contact me as well in terms of my number and other websites, my YouTube page, my music. I'm a singer songwriter and have lots of music that supports the journey that the soul takes and really celebrates who we are in this world. So there's lots there. Anyway, yeah, it's
Well,
just been
good.
so great to have this dialogue with you. It's been
Yeah.
long in the pipeline, and thank you for bringing this together and
Yes,
allowing
yes. My pleasure. Good,
the
good.
wisdom.
And I wish you well. And I know that you're making a difference in the world and you're touching many people through these programs, as well as just, spontaneously as you interact with people, because you are just full of life.
Yeah, I feel the same way about you too, Stephen. Thanks for that sweet plug. You're just it. Anyway, I think another thing we have in common, and I didn't bring it up, and then I'm going to ask you the same question, is our love of writing and really putting ideas and wisdom and concepts together as it relates to current events. For you, you link the current events to astrology. And for me, I link current events through the prism of who we've been as groups of souls since BC China time, ancient times, all the way up to the present moment, and the similarities between, like you've talked about, the Revolutionary Wars, the Civil War, the Black Lives Matter movement now, ancient China, the Yellow River, which was called the river of the Divine Mother. Interestingly, anyway, I don't. It's
And
also
again, we
called.
could go off in that direction
I
because
know it's also
I'm a
called the Yellow
Taoist,
River and all, but anyway, it's yeah. We'll
Confucianism,
get
just
into it later.
so much wisdom.
I know. I'm so sorry, Stephen. You know me. I have the gift for gab. You get me going, and I get all excited. But anyway, um, yeah. So I know you're writing a book based on a future date called Utopia, which is how we can dream into and begin to co-create together, waking our world and truly building a bridge of peace and understanding in a divided world. So we both have that passion. My book is called Thy Kingdom Come, Don't Steal the Crown, Reflections on COVID-19 and Global Leadership through the lens of the Holy Spirit. So, I kind of am weaving all the past pieces into something that makes sense today and the opportunity that we're called to. And you're weaving all the pieces in terms of what we can create as we move into the future. So it's interesting, this yin yang piece we're sharing together.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I know you've written some beautiful books based on your work, and you do tremendous classes with your infinite wisdom and astrology and humor. So please share, a little bit about how people can contact you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yes, yes. So transpersonal.us or transpersonal us. I've had that particular website for many decades now. And also Stephen-Poplin.com. I started that more when I was doing some writing, publishing, and again, looking at decades worth of reincarnation and life between life work that I've been doing. Hundreds of my clients and interesting anecdotes and stories and insights and healings and tears and so forth all went into those 2 volumes. It actually, I started working on it, and it just kept on getting bigger and bigger. I said, this is one big thick book, so I actually divided it into half and said, okay, volume 1 to volume 2. But there's just so much to it, and as I had it finally finished, both volumes published, I then reflected upon it and said, as I was asking those questions in college, in philosophy courses, I've kind of like answered many of the questions, through this book or these books. So I'm really quite pleased with that. And, through those websites, you will get in contact with me. And every summer so far, I've been going back to Europe. I lived there for quite a few years. And I'll be again there the end of June over to Austria and Germany. I just have a good feeling about Europe and Central Europe specifically. And so I'll be back there doing individual sessions.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome how you can balance a home life and travel and meet people with all different backgrounds and views on life and what it's all about. And you just bring such richness to your work, to your books, to your classes, to your speaking. Everything you've shared at the Fellowship of Inner Light, which we both have in common. I just revel in the simplicity, but also the grandiosity of what you're able to weave together in your messages. It's just sweet and charming and blessed and so rich.
Thank you for that, Casey.
Yeah. And one thing I just would like to leave us with, just because it's just an important piece, something as divisive and as controversial as COVID has been on so many levels. It's really divided us in so many ways. Just the name COVID, COVID, dash, of course, 19. If you reverse COVID, you have id, which is the ego, the personality, the individualized identity. Then you have V for victory and transcending and overcoming and rising above. And then you have co at the end, the three, the trinity, co, the id. Just the symbolism of that suggests that rising above our sense of individuality and self-importance and co-creating with the source of all that is, and with being in the waves of that divine energy and intelligence and guiding light that serves humanity en masse, is the opportunity and the calling to whatever difficulty and challenging and tragic, that whole, these years have been in the shutdown and all of that. And so I remember you wrote something years ago and you talked about Ovid, who was a great scholar from the Roman times. And Ovid was a great pioneer of revolution and rising above tyranny. So your take on it was, Ovid's take on it back in the Roman Empire. And my take on it was, rise above the identity and co-create with your divine knowing and the divinity that showers us all. And therein, lies a new opportunity for peace and understanding.
Exactly. And with our individual perspectives that comes from inspiration, metaphysics, and our many, many interesting classes and experiences in life. And then we come to, whether that be COVID or whether that be to the elections here of 2024. And, but it is the contributions from a mixed and rich background for us both that we can say, look at this anew. See what's going on right here, right now. Some of it is rather old. It's like recycled stuff, but it is another opportunity for us to wake up and start again.
Beautifully said. Stephen, this has been such a treat. Thank you for this tapestry and this beautiful dialogue.